What's the flavor of self that meets your parts? Is it a welcoming? Is it a presence? Is it a peace? A tenderness? A love? And when you got that, we're going to get a little bit more, we could go into the more of the danger area, in that I'm going to ask you, what parts respond? What parts respond to this? As you're noticing your parts, the ones that don't know that causeless okay is here, causeless ok-ness is here, and the ones that do know, what parts come up? Does a spiritual achiever come up and say, this is a problem, we should know this, our part should update to this? Is there a critic that says there shouldn't be this suffering, there shouldn't be this pain, we should know this already? Is there a comparison part? Is there maybe some shame that comes up? I shouldn't be feeling this. So whichever parts are coming up, let's see if we can just notice, where do you hear them? Where do you hear the voice of, I'd be better off if something was different? Whatever those voices are, where do you hear them? See if you can find a location. Is it off to your right? Is it in your head? Where's that voice coming from? Find a location. And then, like, what's the loudest one? What's the loudest voice? What's the loudest part? Find a location for that. And what's the next loudest part? Maybe it's one that's just kind of tired, exhausted, wants it to be different, shameful, or maybe it's a part that's thinking about things I need to do today, the to-do list part, or a healer part. What's the second loudest part, and where do you hear that voice? And then just to do what we call our first view in effortless IFS, which is just in any moment, there's the sense that self is here. There's a sanctuary, there's a refuge in self here. As we're aware of these parts, can we just kind of step back, sink in, however it works in your system? And for some of us, there is no movement. We're already there. See if we can just fall back into self, sink into self. It's leaving the foreground of the parts. We're going into the background, sinking in. And can you feel self pervading, whatever quality of self is here? What is the loudest quality of self as you sink into this presence, this peace, this love, this ok-ness, this connectedness? What's the loudest flavor? And can we let ourselves just sink into that, where it pervades us somatically? If we feel this body, that's what we feel. See if you can sink in that way. And then, are you aware of self? Or are you aware also as self? And then from here, be aware again of those two loudest parts, wherever wherever they were located. See if we can stay here and be aware of those two parts. This is the second view in effortless IFS, the Rumi's guest house, the sense of the infinite hot tub. As we just welcome those parts, but we don't do it. There's just a welcoming, which is our nature. This awareness of them is a welcoming. What's it like to sit here for a moment? Is there discomfort that comes as we're aware of these parts? And can that be welcomed as well, whatever somatic experience is happening? We're almost done. Then lastly, as we're aware of these parts, are the parts completely separate from you as self? Are they completely separate? Or can you find that perhaps they arise of self, or that you can find that there's some self, some beingness, some peace, love, happiness in the essence of the parts as well? Is there an intrinsic connectedness here? that's beyond separation? And does anything change if you get a glimpse of that? Anything change? Is there more openness, more peace, maybe even a little bit of bliss? This is the third view. This is when we recognize that everything is ultimately inseparable from this beingness. And let's just notice that there can be fluidity in the system amongst these views. And in any moment when, oh, wow, I'm leaning forward, I'm getting a little blended or identifying with a part, can the system just lean back into self, into beingness, and almost have like a loving indifference towards the parts? It's just like we're just gonna sink in to this hot tub and be this hot tub and this, be this. And then once it's found its footing again, once it's found the sense of some home in self, then there's sense of opening back again to the parts, to whatever's here, to all the precious expressions of life in us, and welcoming them, which is just what we are. We are welcoming. And then as we are that, as we are this roomie's guest house, welcoming these guests, we might notice glimpses of this connectedness, this inseparableness. And then let's when you're ready, let's come back together. That was a lot. That was a lot of dancing. There's a lot of dancing around, dancing with our parts, awareness of our parts and self. As we come back, you might want, like for me, it's nice to just kind of shake it a little bit. And like, and Sophie just joined us. She's like, yeah, I like that shaking idea. You just shake it a little bit. And it's because like that was a lot. And at the same time, there's no place we're going. This is just a celebration of you, just as you are. So, look at Sophie. That celebration of you, just like you are, this beauty that you are, this innocence, this perfection. And just in all of it, even if I was so blended, it really hurt. I was just blended with a part, and that's what it was. It's like that. Everything is welcome. And so, as we dive in together, let me ask you one question. That's just the sense of how are you? And just to notice what's here, notice the parts that come up and what they're arising in, the background of self. And as you're with that, how are you? To notice the parts. I'm just going to do my really quick housekeeping minute, which is that, as you guys all know, I'm a mediator. I'm not a psychotherapist. So this isn't the IFS of psychotherapy. Rather, it's friends and colleagues exploring together and supporting each other. And if everyone's good, being responsible for their own journeys, if I could get a thumbs up from you, please. Awesome. And secondly, that I always record this. I've got the recording on, but only my image would ever be shared. Never, ever your image, only my little square. However, the audio that you share could be shared because often I make this available on my website for those who can't come to the groups. And so the audio could be shared. However, for like Angie, who's new with us, this is different than other groups in that we don't focus on the story so much of the parts. Instead, we focus on what the parts are longing for to help them find that what they're longing for is here, that fulfillment is here. So there's no need to share anything you'd be uncomfortable with. And at the same time, if there's a preference by anybody at any point, just let me know or let me know now. I'll make you a co-host and you can click pause when you speak at any time. And lastly, at the end, if you discover, gosh, I wish I hadn't said that, just stay on the video with me, stay on the Zoom and let me know, and I'll go delete, delete, delete. If everybody's good that this might be shared publicly, if I could get a thumbs up, please. Awesome. So here we are. And let me go ahead and close the door so it will be the 8 of us for this time together as we explore and support each other and celebrate each other. What's going on? Who's got something bubbling with what Angie opened up for us and where we dove? What's happening?
I've got some quite strong parts. And is it okay to carry on?
just hello, Sophie, and just
Hi,
everybody.
hello.
What's that like? What's that? I have some quite strong parts, don't we? Just are we are not already like falling in love with Sophie? It's like just welcoming her and just notice, is there curiosity? What strong parts is she? What strong parts does she have? What strong parts does she have? And do we think, are any of her parts going to be foreign to us? Is anything she going to say, could it be foreign to us? Or are we like, oh, I know that, I know that, I know that. What you got, Sophie? What's going on?
Well, I have a really strong grief part inside me, and when I asked that part, like just then, what are you longing for? I think it's just longing to cry and to feel like held and understood, and um, and like there's nothing wrong with it, like just and that things will be okay. Yeah,
Pause right there.
it wants to feel
Oh,
supported and held, and it's okay.
so how about that? How about how about the awe of, that's what comes here, the awe and Sophie able to speak for this part, this grief part. Those, how are we with that as we hear her speaking of this grief part, and we can feel her, right? We can feel her. We've got the gift of her presence here. What's what's meeting her from you? Is there a sense of the self that's just the compassion, the love, the care, the welcoming? And notice what's here where you don't have to do anything for it. There's just this sense of welcoming her part, her and her parts in this grief. Notice if that's there. And can we also see what parts, what voices you hear? Is there a sense of, oh gosh, I know that so well, or I hope she can find some relief. Like just notice the parts that come up at the same time. And when Sophie speaks of like the clarity she has in her system, right, for this part, this grief part, which is what does it long for? And that it longs to be held, longs to be held. Can we feel that longing in her and then see if we can feel it in the grief, this part in her? And can we find that it might evoke that from us without having to do anything? This sense of welcoming her part and the sense of holding it without doing anything. Can that evoke that from us that she says it longs to be held? This part in her longs to be held. Notice if that comes as we're all the meeting and supporting with effortlessly. That can be evoked from you. Understood. Your part longs to be understood. As we hear that, is there a sense of an intimacy with that, a hearing? Are we hearing this part of her without doing anything? Is there a sense of hearing it? And even like this curiosity to understand, like it's like, wow, what is it that this part, what's happening? What is it longing for? What's going on? It's like reaching, connecting with it, an intimacy with this part, and an understanding. As it wants, as we hear Sophie say, I want it to be that there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with what's happening here. As we hear that, does it evoke a part that might be a little narrative part? Like, of course, there's nothing wrong here, or maybe a part, but does it also evoke this sense of just loving her just as she is? See if we can find that. This is a big deal. And this isn't just, this is what Sophie's leading us on. It isn't just about her. This is about all of our systems. If we can do this for her, we're going to find it becomes much easier to welcome our parts this way. So as we hear this part of her that doesn't want there to be anything wrong with me, can it evoke just can we see the innocence in that part? Can we see the innocence of it? Can we see the innocence in Sophie in this part? And in seeing that innocence, is there anything wrong with it? In seeing that innocence, do we just see the beauty and perfection? If we can see that. And then she says, I want everything to be okay. I want it to be okay. As we hear that, what's of us we hear, I just want to be compassion, love towards her. And then to really push the edge for all of us, can we give her that? Can we find okayness with
Mm.
things just the way they are, even in the depths of this grief, the sadness, the tears? Can we find okayness with her just the way she is? Perfection, beauty, innocence. No need to be like, oh, I hope we'll be able to help heal you or make something different than what is. But can we find this okayness and perfection in just what we're seeing in Sophie? How's it? I hope you can see the gift you're giving to all of us here, and how's it going there? How you doing?
Yeah, it's hard to accept kindness. Kindness makes me cry more. Um, and I feel like there's a flood of emotion and a feeling of like how deep does this go? Like when will it end? You know. Um, but I like the part about not trying to help and but actually um just just valuing it for what it is. And it's the truth of the moment. Yeah.
So what about that? What about just again? Let me just add this for all of us. When will this end? When will this end? I mean, maybe you hear the words, maybe you can also feel it. You can feel that part in Sophie. It's like, when will this end? Maybe a little desperation, tiredness, frustration. It's like, you can feel that. When we hear that from her, what does that evoke? Do we have the compassion, the love, the intimacy, the care, seeing the innocence of that? When will it end? How all of her parts are there taking care of her. And then we've heard some different parts. We've heard some different expressions in Sophie. This when will it end? I want it to be okay. I want everything to be okay. Different expressions. I don't want anything to be wrong here. There's a sense of wanting support, wanting understanding. Like on our shared stage, it's like a stage here that we're sharing, a theater stage for all of our parts. Can all of Sophie be welcomed here? And Sophie, in your system, as we hear these different expressions, especially this last one, when will it end? Are you able to hear, like, find a sense of a location for that? Like, where do you hear that? When will it end? And maybe when we all hear this from Sophie, where's this coming from? Is it outside your head? Is it in it? Is it just this pain in your heart? Where do you find it?
It's a pain in my chest. Yeah. It's a deep pain in my chest. It feels like um it just feels like it could be never ending and it's so painful. And yeah,
Perfect.
it's so
So
painful.
that, so this pain in Sophie's heart, when will this end? And while we're aware of that, Sophie, can you be aware of what's the next loudest voice you hear?
There is um there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be feeling this level of grief for the situation, and there's something wrong with me.
And where do you hear that one? Is that in the head? Is it in front of you? Where do you hear there's
In
something wrong with me?
my chest as well. Yeah.
And can there be a discernment like between these two? Is there a different tone of when will it end and the incredible the sadness, the depth and the pain that's with that, and then this other voice, there's something wrong with me. Is there a different tone? Can you find a discernment between the two?
Yeah, they're both quite desperate sounding, and one of them is heart. This says something wrong with me. It's harsher.
Great.
It's judgmental and sounds harsher.
with this contrast between the two, see if we all can join in this and being aware of her two parts. When will it end? And there's something wrong with me, which is harsher, more judgmental, has a different flavor. And notice for all of us, in just being aware of her two parts, can you find that it becomes more difficult to blend with whatever part might be coming up in us? And being aware of her two parts like this. And what's it like there, Sophie? The sense of being aware of both of these. As you're aware of both of these, does it also allow some awareness of this, that the space that they're arising in, as we can see both of these? When
Yeah.
will it end? There's something wrong with me, the space that arises in.
Yeah, there's some space. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels like there is some space. I don't feel, now that I've recognized these parts, I feel a bit less um intense. The emotion feels less intense. Yeah.
Mhm. It's just
Yeah.
for all of us, then, as we've been welcoming Sophie's parts, can we take it just a little deeper and find our versions of these, perhaps? Because we don't want to miss out on this gift from her. The when will it end? We all have that. Often that's the language of a spiritual achiever. Like, I want to get there. I want to get to this peace, to this self, to this okayness. Like, so if you find that voice, and also that voice of there's something wrong with it, and don't get too close to it, but whatever your version of there's something missing, something needs to change, there's something wrong with me. And then see how Sophie, she went from there was a sense of blending with one, then blending with the other, then we were aware of both of them, and then there was a little more space. Are you able to be that space with those parts inside of you? We're gonna, this is a lot. We're gonna move on in just a moment. And this is what we call the Rumi's guest house or the infinite hot tub, the sense of what they're being in, what they're resting in. And my last question, Sophie, is can your parts feel that? That there's a sense of, there's awareness of them. They're being welcomed here, both by your system and there's all of us here that are with them too. Maybe there's a sense of soaking in this ocean of being or this love. Can your parts feel that?
Yeah. They can. I think it's soothing. It's soothing because I can see people's expressions and just yeah, it's nice to feel that support.
It's soothing. Can we all relate to that? Maybe in empathically feeling her system, or just being aware of these parts that are on the stage and they're being welcomed, your parts as well. And you find soothing from being. This is where healing happens effortlessly. There's just a soothingness that happens with our parts. And lastly, for all of us to notice, I use this word capacity that I'm wanting to invite us all to stay aware of throughout today. Because Sophie, just this is a lot. Like, to go with like, when will it end? There's something wrong with me. Those can be really intense. And we have our capacity is not for self, right? Self is unlimited in what it can welcome. It just is welcoming. It is space. It is love. But our parts aren't unlimited, especially our young parts that are like, this is scary. I don't like feeling this. I don't like this shame. This is too much. And we just to recognize that. And that's when we're like, okay, let's just kind of pause here. We're not going to go deeper into any of this. We're just gonna maybe do what Sophie was doing earlier. We're gonna just shake a little bit, whatever your system needs. Yeah, let's just we can just like we're gonna transition here. We're gonna transition, but the invitation is to stay aware of your system because that's really what's going on here. And there's nothing we got to go to because I have this friend that says, "Oh, we're just going from here to here, from here to here." Like, are we really going anywhere? It's like home is. You are beauty. You are innocence. There's no place to go. Sophie, any final words? But we're not leaving you. There's a sense we're all staying in this together with your parts and with this the soothing and the welcoming. I just want to see what's bubbling up and then just keep going around the circle. Any kind of final thoughts with what we've opened, what you've led us all into today?
Well, you mentioned that this part is trying to protect me, this grieving part, and I can't work out how. I wonder how it's trying to protect me because it doesn't feel like that.
How about that? The parts are doing their very best. They're doing their very best from their perspective. And that the grieving, it might be an exile of vulnerability that's just feeling this pain, feeling the sadness. And then we have parts that come, protector parts that are like, when's this going to end? This is horrible. I want something to be different. Yeah, just to see the innocence of it, the grieving that's in us, the pain that we feel, the shame that we all feel, like the innocence in that. Like is there just the pure innocence? Like as we hear Sophie describe this, all we see is innocence, right? All we see, you just see the innocence, the beauty of it. Like there's no problem here. It's beautiful. Final thoughts, Sophie?
Thank you.
Mm, wow. Ooh. How are we doing? What's bubbling up for us, gang? That was so exquisite. Vendor, I love that. Yeah, Raymond.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie, very much for being fragile in front of us. It's absolutely beautiful to see, as Sid was saying. And I'm not saying these things here, Sid, to fix or change anything, but, so I'm well acquainted with grief. Myself, a few years ago, I came out of a 30-year relationship and I had to leave my 4 children. And what I learned in that process, because why I'm saying this is it's like Tara Brach says, we need the two wings of the bird. We need the wing of understanding and love, but we need a wing of wisdom. So for me, the wisdom of grief is love. And I'll tell you why I say that, because grief is unexpressed love. So when I left my children for that short time, I couldn't express my love to them directly and physically. So that's what I grieved, because I was grieving because I couldn't love in some way. Someone dies, we grieve because we can't love them because they're not there. So um, that's what all raised in me said when I feel someone who is grieving, um, and it absolutely does finish. And even that longing that you mentioned, said, to me, the longing is a gift as well. The gift of wanting to stay with the grieving, and the wisdom is knowing that is, it's just the natural process for me. When I'm hurting, I cry, and it feels like my heart's breaking, like you described, Sophie, across your chest, and it does. It breaks your heart. So yeah, I'll leave it there, Sid. But I just wanted to say that important part for me is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with grief. It's actually a form of love.
Beautiful. So for all of us, as we hear Raymond share his experience of grief and what it's been for him, of this unexpressed love when he was separated from his children, the grief that was there for him in the unexpressed love, in the sense of the for him, this is we all have our own understandings, right? I mean, that's the game here, and the way to come up with our own maps, our own understandings, our own way of making sense of all of this. And that's why it's such richness in hearing where Sophie took us, and then we're hearing how Raymond makes sense, how it plays in his system with grief. And can we include on our giant stage here, on our infinite stage, can we include Raymond and his parts, the sense of grief, the sense of longing, the wisdom, understanding love, all of this. Thanks. Who else has got something? Anything else bubbling with what Sophie shared? Anything else coming up for us? Yeah, Angie.
I'm going to do my best to be coherent because I feel like you started kind of with my stuff and and everybody's is it's I'm feeling it, the resonance with my stuff, what I brought in. When Sophie was the pain that feels like it will never end, I didn't realize that she named that part of mine that is experiencing this situation with my daughter, and it is afraid that this will never end. What's going on right now, the pain about it, and then her part that feels that there's something wrong with her resonated with my part that is like, why is this happening to me, or why is this happening to us? And it's a little different flavor, but it's like, why is this happening to me? Like, what did I do? Why is this happening? And then, I'm sorry, the gentleman that spoke after.
Oh, Raymond.
I mean, just talking about having to leave your children, because what I'm carrying is around family and my daughter. And I think anticipatory grief, I think some part of me, I'm going to give a tiny bit of context, even though I know that the specifics of my situation aren't that relevant, but my 22-year-old is now in a relationship with someone whose values and beliefs and way of life, she met him studying abroad, and so now her values and her beliefs and how she's living her life is changing dramatically, and it is affecting our family and I'm just trying to hold the place of trying to be open to this being okay.
Yes.
And my system is not prepared for this. But yet, what we're talking about here today, it's just it's helping me find that place.
Beautiful.
Of can this be okay, even though her choices and what's happening seems so different to our culture, to our culture.
So what about first the welcoming all the resistance and all the preference that it would be different. Gosh, it'd be better if she was my 22-year-old was a different person with someone else, that this wasn't happening. If she could understand what I'm saying about what's happening to her. As for all of us, as we hear Angie, can we hear these parts of her that are coming up? And this other part that's like, I really want to find okayness with this. I don't want to be in this tension. I want to find okayness with all this. There's another part that's inspired. Maybe it's a spiritual achiever looking for the okayness. As we hear her parts, what happens for all of us? Is there a sense of, can we welcome them? Is there love of those parts? Can we see the innocence of, gosh, this is really hard. I'm seeing with my daughter. I love her. I just don't want this to happen this way. Can we see the innocence of our parts and welcome them? And for all of us, can we hear a couple parts in Angie, to be able to just be aware of a couple parts here, a few at the same time, and welcome them to the stage? And that's my invitation for you as well, Angie. As you were speaking this, like, gosh, I really want to find okayness. Where do you hear that? Just to notice the sense of, I want to find okayness with this, that part. The part that's like, oh, I'm watching her values and her lifestyle change in being with this man, and I don't like it. That this is really having an impact on our family, and the one that this part that's seeing that and is worried about that. Can all of those, this is where we're quite different than classic IFS, that we're being aware of these multiple parts simultaneously. And part of the reason, part of what happens when we do that is we become, where you're aware from is the self. It becomes, it automatically opens up this awareness of, from beingness, from this okayness. So it helps us have this simultaneous awareness from beingness and of the parts. How you doing, Angie?
I'm feeling really grateful. Really grateful. Because with what's going on, it is so easy for me to find people that will totally validate my experience of how concerned I am. It's
Yes.
it's very sorry. Sorry. It's very difficult to find this kind of space that can validate trying to be okay with what is.
Yes.
I can find plenty of validation for the resistance.
Yes. And notice the sweetness in that, in the parts. We all can find this, right? Parts that, God, I don't like this. This is too much. I'm not liking the way things are going, and they're having difficulties. How those parts like to be heard, connected with, and perhaps reassured or validated. It's just what happens when the parts are wanting that. Okay? And this is where, and you'll notice that the parts are maybe reaching out for, they want relief through that. We're going for something more subtle here. We're trying to direct them to a relief that comes from the very nature of what we are, from this self, from this beingness. But we might notice a tension with our parts that are wanting, no, I want to be heard. This is not right. This needs to change. And all of that gets to be welcomed, but it's just more subtle how we're playing here. Any kind of final thoughts with this, Angie, before we continue opening it up?
Just wanted to apologize for all my dogs. And yeah, and I guess I just wanted to say that again, the gratitude for exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Thank you. How are we all doing? We all know this, right? Can we find this again as Angie's leading us here? We can find this with our parts, right? The ones that are frustrated and resistant, and they're desperate for something to change. And then those do that in the world, right? There's a concurrence of the parts doing all of what they can do to try to change it. And then at the same time, this is what I'm calling the spiritual work, is being aware as we're aware of them and letting them find some home here in self. They're also being able to find some welcoming, some refuge, some peace, some okayness right here. All right, what's bubbling? Any other bubblings with from Sophie's and Angie's and Raymond's sharing? Anything else bubbling in response? Yeah, Vendor. Oops, muted.
Basically, the stuff was coming up for me. I'm trying to find that being, the self, to making it okay. Seems like there's a theme today around the grief, and for me, wanting to have a change. It was beautiful what Angie said, that, when she felt the gratefulness, how grateful she is for the space.
Grief and finding the okayness of there's the sense of making it okay. This is the finding the okayness. Like, how do we, what's most like that for all of us right now, what Vendor was pointing to, this okayness. And this is what Angie started the very thing with today, at the very beginning before everybody was here. She was talking about this finding, touching the okayness. And some of us, it might be that word ok-ness. For others, it might be, oh, wait, there's some love here, even in the midst of this. There's some peace here. There's presence here. What is that for you? Finding ok-ness, even in the midst of all of this. What's the flavor that comes up of that ok-ness? Vendor, what do you find? Is it just this presence, this awareness? What's the ok-ness that's here?
Kind of fluctuate between anger comes up too for me. And, there's a little bit of ok-ness, I'm okay with it. But anger comes when I'm having to fix other, like when I'm approached, when things get worse, that
Yes.
sense of responsibility and underneath there's sadness, but I don't have any control over what's like the
But
grief comes up.
what about that? What about that? Just the anger and sadness as Vendor, as you described that, yeah, there's just anger comes up when I'm having to do this, anger. We can all find that. There might have been some, I don't know, we might have even heard some of that in Angie about the situation, anger about it, right? Anger comes up. Do we, sometimes again, it's easier in hearing this in other people and then our own system. If we were hearing anger in Angie's system, it would be like this desperation. I want my daughter to be okay. I want the family to be okay. I want everything to be okay. It can be like anger and this wanting, this longing for this okayness. When we hear the anger, like if we heard it in Angie in that way, or in however it might show up in each of us, can we see the innocence of that anger and how it's just doing its best to serve and support and protect? Can we, is it possible that we could fall in love with Angie's anger? Like really, it just evokes love for us. We just see it's the beauty of it. And then what about in our own system when the anger comes up? Oh, that's different, Sid. That's really different when it comes up in me. Like, what about when the anger comes up in us? Can we taste the innocence of it? Vinder, anything else you want to share with that?
Fear of speaking up, and I just feel this choking feeling in my throat. But you were saying earlier, if you didn't have to do anything, like just welcome it. Because I have this urge to fix it or make it better for the other person. Then last night anxiety was kicking in. As soon as this family person comes in, I just love him dearly. Because he's doing whatever he needs to cope with life, but I
Yes.
find it really hard, the grief.
Yeah. So that this welcoming of what's here, the grief, the anxiety, the anger, the tension, the choking in the throat, the sense of, because self just does, right? Self just is the space that welcomes and loves what is. Like we can notice all of this, and then also we don't need to be masochists. Wait, I can't say that word. We don't need to be mean to ourselves. We don't have to be negligent of our systems. Like then at the same time, we can notice there's a welcoming, and then this capacity thing, we can notice like, okay, that's enough. Or I really don't want to have this guest to come in my house, or I really don't want to put myself in this situation. It's more than I can digest right now. Thank you. Thank you, Vendor. Let's see let me open it and see what else is coming up. Who wants to share? Jessica, Sarah, Susan, what's going on? Susan!
Yes, hi. Well, there's quite a bit it's fairly quiet, but there's a lot bubbling in response to all this. So in response to the angry parts, I had quite a strong reaction to that, which was I don't want angry parts acting out around me, really. I feel quite strongly about, I've got parts that feel really strongly about that, and I understand why. I only want anger that's kind of clear, and direct and you know, like on it. I don't really want any parts acting out with their anger around me. That come up quite strongly.
So how about that part? How about that clarity, Susan? That there's that clarity in your system, like, okay, it's just this protector. Like, I don't want this. I don't want this drama. I don't need it. I'm wanting to have this boundary here. And if anger is, as you say, if there's clear, but if it's acting out, I'm not interested. I'd rather not go there. Can we all, as we hear Susan's parts, because some of us, there might be parts that might be even, it could be even offended by this. It's like, gosh, is it not okay for me to be angry here if Susan's here? And just to notice any parts that come up like that, right? And then we're going to go deeper. We're going to go deeper to see if we can really appreciate this heroic protector part in her that's saying, not interested. I'm wanting to, for whatever reason, she said there are good reasons for this part, right? That's just like, this is the way I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not interested in that. Like, see if we can find, like, really see the innocence of that and the beauty of that part. Because it might be difficult if you were hearing a no towards you from Susan. This is really good stuff. If you can really hear the innocence in that part of hers and really appreciate it, even if the no is coming towards you, even if this boundary is being set there, can we appreciate it? Because I'm guessing in Susan, she has some parts that really don't like that one either. It's like, wait a minute, I got this I need to say. I'm frustrated. And it's like, can we love this part of Susan's? All right, please continue, Susan.
It feels quite certain about that. I can't quite, it's quite a militant little part, that one. So I haven't got parts coming up in reaction to it at the moment. I don't suppose they dare. I don't know. But the other bit about the grief, when Sophie was speaking, funny enough, what came up for me today was a part that appeared because I've got quite a lot of friends around me who are quite poorly. They're all getting diagnosed with bloody cancer. And I just was really in touch with the tragedy of, I mean, life is a tragedy. It ends with death, right? Of the body. I mean, I know there's other understandings, but at the very human level, it's a bloody tragedy for all of us, isn't it? Me included, you know. And so I've got a part that feels grief, but there's other parts managing that absolute overwhelm of what the fuck, you know, I'm sorry, excuse me if anyone's offended with my language, but what, you know, it's just a tragedy. There's no good way out of here. And the ones that are left behind, the ones that leave behind. So it's kind of, there's no good ending at a human level. So I've got another part so there's a part that's overwhelmed, and then with that, another part that's not letting it overwhelm me, and another part that just is looking for what's permanent here, what's real here, what's the permanent. We need to just, you know, take cover in the permanent. And it's not sure if self is that or not. There's a bit of so I guess that's why I'm here anyway, is to sort of really get more established in self. But that's what's driving it. I mean, it's the core of what's driving it, really, is fear of my death, fear of everybody's death.
So
yeah.
how about that for us all when we hear Susan speak of that? But this life is a tragedy. There is no way out. It all ends. There's death. And let me just say, don't go close to this. Like we were talking about capacity of our systems, that we're going to go a little deeper into the scary places right now when we talk about this. But don't go with us. Like mind your system. Like Sophie's got such beautiful happenings going on in her system. Don't get distracted by this. You can just be aware of this on the outside. But and Angie, all that's happening, like don't. This is because this can parts can react to this as well. So this sense of, for us, where do we go with this? The sense of death. What is that? How do your parts respond to what Susan was sharing? Do you have parts that are like that? Do you have different parts? Do they have different opinions? And can they be included? The ones that are really sad, wow, I'm going to lose people I love and they're going to lose me. basically, can this be included? Can death be included here on the timeline, the sense of the timeline, what happens in time here to this body and time, this can it be included? And then to also notice what resists it, what thinks it's like, this is overwhelming. I don't want it. This is bad. This is, you know, I'm losing people I care about, and I'm going to lose others, and I don't want. That's tragic. Who wants to do that? The resistance. Can we see the resistance to death that comes up in our system? Can we see it? The voices that come up, the contractions that come up, and can that be welcomed and included? And perhaps as well, this one that Susan describes, this one that just wants to find a sanctuary from it. It's like, okay, but I know that these spiritual people speak of, there's something else, this being, there's something that's untouched by it, perhaps. And like, there's this maybe something, this a spiritual achiever that wants to find a way away from it. And then just as far as these parts that have to do with death, this is effortless IFS. We're not going into them. We don't have to get close to them. And you can just notice your system, how close it gets to them, how aware it is. And that's what's perfect. That's what's perfect. How you doing, Susan? What's coming up?
Well, it's good you said, can we accept this? So I just sort of imagined opening myself to more loss, death, my death. Anyway, I was opening or trying to, or going with that, accepting it, and actually something opened in the imagining of more loss, and something in my heart opened. That was nice. It was just,
yeah.
so it's good to know. It was sort of like a feeling of doing it now, but there was also this feeling as I do it, that will happen, as well as it happening now. So it happened in the moment, but it was like, this is what happens if you actually go with it. As much as I can, be present to whatever life has for me. And it's the same for all of us, really, in this way. That there'll be an opening, as well as it being in this moment, I felt it. I was sort of shown it.
Yes.
That was nice.
Nice. What about a natural rhythm in this whole thing for all of us? Like we could track, like when Susan was describing a part that was overwhelmed, we all know this. We could feel it in Sophie and Angie and Vinder. It's like whenever any of us speak it, we can touch that. We can touch the sense of, okay, that's enough, or we're touching an edge here. And this is what we call the first view in effortless IFS, a sense of, okay, we can just kind of rest back. We can sink back in to self, this okayness, this peace, this presence, whatever's here for us. And then as the system's ready, then it can come back to welcoming. And then sometimes it could even welcome what Susan's been speaking of, this idea of death and loss and resistance to that. That some of that can be welcomed too. And then it touches us, oh, this is enough. This is overwhelmed. And we can just fall back into self. Anything else, Susan?
No, just gratitude, like Angie expressed earlier. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for, I mean, who saw that coming? Who saw that coming, right? It's like, whoa. And like, where are we going next? What do we have next? I'm going to shake a little bit just to play this. Like, here we go. As we move on to what's next. And again, here we are. It's just like we're like teenagers playing after school before we're getting called in for dinner. It's like we're just hanging out. We're just playing. We're not needing to make progress. The system, it does it on its own. It's all just updates, parts updates, the beauty of IFS. Before we go to where we're going next with this, I'm curious to do a quick check-in with Sophie. I'm curious, is everything going okay? How's it going there?
Yeah, my thanks for checking in. My grief part is gone, and I've got like this slight anxiety happening. I'm going into my head, sort of trying to analyze, just for some context. When I have in romantic relationships, I have this pattern of getting very attached and feeling very trapped. And that's the grief I had to end it with my partner after a few months recently, yesterday, because the trapped feelings are just so overwhelming. and then the grief obviously comes, and it's strong, and yeah, and the sort of what's wrong with me, and will I ever overcome this pattern that I don't seem to be able to overcome. And the trap stuff is sort of coming up, the grief's gone, and then this sort of part that's going, okay, I need to work out this trapped stuff. What's the trapped stuff about? I need to work that out. I need to find out what that's about. If I could
Yes.
just solve that, it would all change.
Yes. Yes. So just for all of us, again, as we hear this preciousness in Sophie's system, how are we, what's our relation with that? Is it this welcoming? Is this curiosity, this love, this endearment towards everything she says? And then and what parts come up in us? What parts come up, and can they be welcomed? And then as we hear these parts of Sophie, and for you, Sophie, can all of these be seen, these precious parts, this sense of being trapped, it's not safe, I need to get out, right? This for all of us, as we hear these parts in her, can we welcome them? And can we also find that they're not foreign to us, even though in Sophie's system, she might be like, wow, something's really, I'm kind of special, or maybe something's wrong with me, that I have this sense of trap coming up that comes up in a relationship. But I'm going to suggest that we all can find this. This isn't foreign to any of us. So notice if you can find it as I just read back her parts, that nothing, she's not special. This is, we all know this. The specialness, the trappedness, the sense of trapped, and when something ends, the grief that comes, the grief that's here about the end of her relationship. This the thing that comes up, what's wrong with me? Why does this happen to me? What's wrong with me that I have this pattern that I need to get away? What's wrong with me? I need to overcome this. I need to work this out. I need to figure out a way of fixing this. See if you, as I share this stuff, see if you can be aware of multiple ones of these in your system, like to be able to hear that, wow, this is the theater that's happening, and just for all of us. And then last, the anxiety she was describing that was coming up. And we all can relate to that, right? It's like, wow, how am I going to do this? How am I going to fix this? Is this going to happen again as we hear these parts? And are we not just in love with Sophie's system? Are we not just in love with these parts? Are we just in love with them? The preciousness, the way they're trying to take care of her. Even the one that says, you're trapped, you got to get out of this, you got to get space. How that one is taking care of her. If you can see the innocence of it, the beauty of that part. Final thoughts, Sophie.
I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. Yes. Yes. And it might sound so weird, but there's a sense of like we're almost throwing a birthday party for each other's parts. Like we're celebrating them and loving them and seeing their innocence and welcoming them and seeing that there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with anything that's been said with any of these parts. We can hear this, even the one that says there's something wrong with me, this is a problem. We don't hear that. We hear the innocence of it, the beauty of it. And if we can see that in Sophie's system, if we truly can see this with all of our parts, it can really change things in our own system. It's so much easier to do it with Sophie than with ourselves. All right, let's open this back up. Where are we going to go? Jessica, Sarah, what's happening? Any comments? Who wants to share what's going on with you?
I can try. There's so much happening right here. I don't know what to speak for. I heard something recently about rage is unexpressed anger. And I have these deep wells of rage, and I just was kind of sitting with that and how much I've stuffed down my whole life. Don't say this, don't be that, do this, don't do that. Like how much of myself I've just not spoken up for. And then when Sophie started talking, I mean, I literally had the thought yesterday, what if I could just show up crying and that's fine? And Sophie, that was just, thank you for just being here and being you. Um, oh gosh, I feel very muddled. Well, what I went through like a whole, like just hearing everyone and all my parts and parts that, you know, my system has a hard time being with, and but also wanting to hear them and the balance of that. And one of the things I thought was, because I've spoken before about how all of my movement feels like movement away from pain. And what if the joy of life is it's okay for it to all be here and we don't have to move away from it? That's kind of I'm just playing with that thought a little bit. And then as Sophie was just talking, I was noticing the importance of trust, because I have parts that think it's my job to do something about anything that, you know, needs attention. And I have parts that do it out of protectors that do it for protection. And noticing what I'm learning inside is my parts trusting each other. And what does that look like externally? Like the trust, like to care and to trust someone to care for their own parts, and to be trusted to care for my parts, and for there to be care, like not a, oh good, you got it, like there to be care and holding, and it gets to be here, and also we trust each other. Anyway, that's a bit of what's been going on here this morning.
Oh, wow. I got a question. I got a question with this. First off, what's that like for all of us as we hear this deliciousness of what's happening in Jessica and how she's able to express it in such a beautiful way? What's that like? And then the sense of when you spoke of this joy of life, that it was okay for it all to be here, just the way it is, and that it doesn't need to move away from it or change it, this joy of life. And so what I'm wondering, Jessica, is when you've been hearing Sophie's system, right? When Sophie showed up the way she did, and this just openness, and Angie's, and Susan, and Raymond, and Vender, could you find that? Could you find that just this love of what is, how it was expressing itself, just the way it was? What were you finding?
Yeah, because this is a safe space, right? So I do trust everyone here that they can be with their parts, and and so and my part that feels like I'm supposed to do something about it has been quiet. So she must trust too that it's not my job, and so then I just get to be with people as they are being as they are.
So what's that like just for all of us? This sense of, could we really just be with and enjoy what's here and appreciate and, fall in love with, we have endearment towards compassion, care, of as we hear from each other. as Jessica says, I can just able to be with what's here, because we're practicing and playing with external, with these others, with these other systems. If we can find that with them, and we're trying to get used to that, touching what Jessica calls the joy of life. It's a very beautiful thing, right? The joy of life, the loving what is. Like there's just nothing needs to change. It's an acceptance of what is, an enjoyment of what is, an appreciation of what is. Like, are we able to find that in each other here? And what's that like when we do touch that? It's like, oh, this is nice. What's it like? And then we also notice that parts come up that maybe even in Jessica's system, that when we hear Sophie describe all of this, there's a part that might come up like, God, I really like to help her. She's my sister. I want to do this, you know, or another part that, or maybe a comparison part, like, wow, I am just, I was even thinking that thought today. And it's just like just to hear the parts that come up in us, right? And can they be welcomed as well in this joy of life as we're being with each other? What do you find in Jessica?
What's the question?
Oh, never mind. It's like it's just mind stuff. It's like here we are in this joy of life together, in this presence, in this appreciation.
I think there's a question in me of like, or this like, I don't know if that's the joy of life, but for a part of me, maybe, like for the part of me that has, you know, been silenced, or the part that feels disconnected, or like maybe for a part of me that's what the joy is, or I don't know.
Yeah. And what about the parts of us that kind of obscure this? That obscure this flow, that obscure this appreciation, that maybe didn't let us enjoy Sophie as much as we could have, right? As much as we can. All of these parts of her, or enjoy Jessica right now. What are the parts that come up? And for me, it might be like, oh, I'm taking a walk with my mom and her friends in 25 minutes. Thank you, bye. Oh, oh, Sarah left. Oh, darn. What are the parts that obscure this flow, this richness, this dance, this joy? And like, again, for me, it's like, oh, I'm going for a walk in 25 minutes. I am wearing a shirt from a couple days ago. I'm wondering if I'm going to be smelly to my mom's friends. And it's just, but it's just, it's whatever parts, or maybe there might be a part like, oh, what are people thinking of me? Did I say too much? Did I share too much? It feels vulnerable. It's like, as we notice those parts, can they be welcomed? Or are they just being welcomed effortlessly for all of us? The parts that obscure this flow, this peace, this joy. Because what we're looking at is we don't necessarily have to go to the extreme of what Susan was speaking of, like to step fully out into the great depths of beingness to find okayness, to go to this absolute, that we can even be here in life, dancing with everybody, and just noticing and welcoming our resistance that arises. Any final thoughts, Jessica?
I don't think so. Just that the parts who are resisting it need to.
Need to.
Mm-hmm.
I need to leave. From Raymond. Before you leave, Raymond, will you give us some final? I was hoping to come back around to Raymond time. Give us something.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have shared this, said, I mean, I come to these sessions because I love the type of people that you attract to these sessions. And my parting words, I was listening to an old song today, really old, the 60s. It was by the Tremolos, and it's called Silence is Golden. And the line in the song says, silence is golden, but my eyes still see. And in everything that we're talking about, and I'll be honest, Sid, I mean, I've got parts like everybody else, but they don't often surface in these things. That's why when I don't talk about it, it's because they're not coming up, they're silent. But I think that for me is the parting shot, which is anything that's speaking for me, I know that's not my silence. And anything that's moving in me, I know that that's not my stillness. And all of it's welcomed, all of the moving and all of the speaking. But the key for me is knowing the different taste between what I see and what I see moving, and the taste of stillness and the taste of silence. And silence is golden. So thank you. And yeah, I love you, Sid. And I love the people that you bring around. So yeah, and love and namaste to everyone else. See you soon. Yeah, bye-bye.
See you soon. Isn't namaste so nice? It's almost like you say the stillness, the peace, the love in me greets that in you. And then Raymond, who's playing with the discernment between self and parts, right? That he's calling between silence and sound and stillness and movement. The discernment and the sense of loving, he's just in love with self, right? And so in his system, the discernment is becoming clearer and clearer. But then there's this other place that we all touch, that I call the third view. And this is when we touch silence sounding, stillness moving. When we touch that the parts are inseparable from self. When we might touch this sense of awe, this unity, this connectedness, that where even the form and parts are all of this. Yet, for most of us, it's incredibly helpful to spend a lot of time with that discernment between the two. So our system really gets to know beingness, it gets to know self, it gets to know home. And the either or can be really helpful along the way with that. And I just didn't want to miss something that Jessica shared at the end, and then we'll open this back up because we've got another 16 minutes to see what's bubbling for everybody. I love where Jessica ended, was this sense of her parts, the resistance. They need to, I forget something like that. They need to speak this. This is what needs to happen to express themselves, perhaps to say no or whatever the preference is. And I love the sense of the compassion. Like if we're truly loving what is and welcoming what is, to be able to see, wow, they're doing the very best they can. And a lot of they need to do this. They need to do this. Like, if that can truly, truly be seen, if it could truly, deeply be seen and welcomed, then this joy of life on the inside becomes easier to access as we can see the parts are doing their best and their innocence, and they need to do this. Just like we would never tell Susan she should have described something differently, or her parts should be different than what they are. Like that would just be craziness if we started to tell her that, right? We wouldn't do that. Or to say something to Sophie about, oh, that part's wrong. That's a bad part. You don't know it. Like that's craziness, right? There's a sense of loving what is in their part. That's why it's easier out there than it is in us. Anything else, Jessica? No. Woo! Okay, there's a lot. I'm going to shake again and let's open it all up. What's bubbling? Who's got something with all of this? That was a lot. Angie, you're unmuted. You got something.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get into my head too much about this. I'm just reflecting on when Susan was sharing, and I felt like I got a big hit of, I don't know, awareness or connectivity or something, because I have a part that in this situation with my daughter has been feeling alone, and that nobody understands exactly where I'm at. feeling like you could have a child going through addiction, or you have a child, but it's like, this situation is so unique. And so I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to share about it because it just makes me feel alone. And for what, when she was sharing, I got this hit of, oh, this part of me that is caring so much about this situation with my daughter believes, is informed by the belief that we've only got one life to live. We have to live it well, and has all this fears that she's not going to live her life well, and that she's limiting herself. And I was just so aware that how all this that I'm caring about my daughter just goes back to the limited time we have here on the planet, and death. And that's not unique to me at all. And so it was just kind of this flash of, you think that this situation is so unique, but what's underneath your feelings about it is universal. It was, yeah. So then that helped. That helped to realize, oh, I'm holding what she's holding, what we're all holding, is how do we deal with death? And yeah.
It hasn't come up a lot in our groups. Rarely death. Jessica's been to almost as many of them as I have, and so it's and so what a gift to include this to whatever degree our systems want to. Yeah, thank you, Susan and Angie. Anything you're needing from us, Angie, or what in that sharing? I was just kind of taking it all in.
No, I think that awareness, or that flash, or what, like, it was just wanting to be seen.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, you know, in sharing that, you kind of were facilitating all of us in appreciation of that. Thank you.
I think maybe in that there is this little bit of like, am I right? Like, I'm not alone in this, right? Like, am I right?
No, none of us know this. None of us have any of this fear. Oh, we only have X amount of time left in our life. There's that. Nah, that's just you.
Yeah.
And Sophie's got anything else, Angie? I think Sophie's got something bubbling for us.
Yep.
What you got, Sophie?
So something shifted during this session, and it was triggered by Raymond. Very interesting. And Raymond saying that that, you know, grief is sort of love that is not able to express. And I've been sort of denying that perhaps part of me did love this person, because if I can feel like I didn't really love him and he wasn't right, I can blame him instead of myself. So I reacted quite strongly to that, and that triggered my anxiety. And I was thinking, oh my God. And then I just settled into, yeah, I think part of me did love him and does still love him. And then, of course, I started thinking about the trappedness and the trap feelings that have sort of meant that I've had to end it, and hating those feelings and feeling like, and then wanting to cry again, like, this is just useless. You know, it's my fault. I've got someone here who I potentially love and could make a go with, and I just can't do it because my trap feelings and I hate them and blah, blah, blah. And how am I ever going to get over them? And I went down that rabbit hole. And then, because it's a pattern that I have in relationships, and then something that you said, Sid, I then thought, how could I like these trapped? How can I embrace these trapped feelings? Like, how can I do that? How could I? They're ruining my life. And then I just started to, and I just felt this huge relief. And I just thought, these trapped feelings are trying to protect me. They're just as valid a part of me as the grief is. And rather than me hating them and trying to get rid of them and ignore them and push them away, they need to be honored. They are part of me. And yes, I feel trapped in relationships and in close relationships, and that's a part of, and that is a part of me, and that's my needs, and that's a way of my body and my system it telling me what my needs are. And that just, and that's as far as I got to with that, but it sort of really, really made me, a big weight came off my shoulder, because I've sort of gone from going, well, it's all my fault, what's wrong with me, to like actually owning this is happening for me, but this is a part of me, and this is there for a reason, and that's it. Yeah, maybe I do love him, but this part's stronger than that, and this part needs me and is part of me and has to be honored. And I think just that has really sort of changed everything for me just then, where I just feel like a lot brighter and a lot lighter, and like, yeah, and worthy, like not fragmented, but actually I'm whole. I feel whole again. Yeah, and like I'm worthy and I'm whole, and I'm, yeah.
Yeah. Can we track how that might have happened in your system in this hour and a half together? This shift in perspective, and just for all of us, what are we seeing in Sophie's system? This is just beautiful what we're seeing here, and what I think it can represent in being identified, blended with parts, right? Blended with, when is this going to end? Is it always going to be like this? And then there's some space opens, and it goes from I gotta ignore these parts of me, I gotta get rid of them, I gotta change them, to sense of honoring them, honoring what's here. Like just being able to see it is such a big deal. Be aware of the parts is that's 2/3 of the way there. If we can be aware of them, we can really see our theater of parts, as we were playing with Sophie's parts, right? And then as we get to start to see them more, you can't help but see the innocence, the love for them, just kind of, it starts opening. And then in her system, it went to the sense of honoring them, to be honored. And then there's space that's open, and there's a sense of some wholeness that comes back instead of fragmentation. How are we doing, Sophie? I'm just kind of doing a bit of interpreting through the eyes of Sid, but you're the expert.
Yeah, it feels and I'm loving seeing Angie smiling, and like Jessica with her hand on her heart, and it feels wonderful to feel like everyone's there with me, and I'm gonna cry again, but everyone's there with me, and like supporting and not judging me and not hating me and thinking that I'm wrong, but just wanting me to just with me. And thank you, it's really nice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Really made a difference.
I want to do a happy dance for you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh. And the process of acceptance was sort of, that I had the reaction to Raymond, and then sort of tried to resist that a bit, and then it sort of went, and yeah, that process of then finally embracing that part. And I have a part that's like, right now I need to work with it and work out what's wrong with it, but I'm not going to for the moment. I'm just going to settle in the fact that I've brought it into me.
Thank you, Sophie. We've got like 5 minutes left, and Sophie just shared something. Was it anything bubbling in response to that, or anything that you're wanting to share in this last 5 minutes? But I just really touched by that, Sophie. Thank you so much. Susan, yeah.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, yeah, there's an awesomeness to this process of accepting and seeing the gift in the parts, like the trapped part, the part that feels trapped. And the other thing that you said about perhaps I did love him, and also allowing that to be there. The trapped part might be stronger, but actually maybe you love this person. because I have parts that just love to love. It just made me think, I'm thinking about what Raymond said earlier. I have these parts that need to love. They need to love. And if that's let down in whatever way, it's very painful.
Yeah.
And it just needs sort of objects of love. I don't really, or people to love, but you know, it's kind of like it needs somewhere for that love to go. And it's very painful when that's severed for any reason. So I was thinking about that yesterday, so it's just come back up. And the other thing that touched me with Angie, apart from sort of seeing the connection with other people, even if the story is different in terms of their children and so on, was just the maternal, the way she's so concerned about her daughter's life. And it was just, you know, that maternal love and wishes for their children. You know, I'm not a mother. I see it in my family and I have it for my family members, but that maternal sacrificial love is absolutely awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So just respect for that too. That's just what I noticed when you checked in. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susan. We have 3 more minutes. Anything else bubbling?
I really like what Susan just said about the need to love, because maybe I've just sort of thought again, like we all have that need to love, you know, and actually it's as much about my need to love as him as a person, if you know what I mean. And that love can go somewhere else at some point. It's just that need to love, isn't it? That then when it's severed for that period of time, you, like you say, feel that pain, and it just makes it feel more about me than him, which is much nicer. You know, it feels less loss-like and more about me and my need to love, and actually maybe embracing that I'm a really loving person. You know, and that's part of it, is I'm warm and loving and want to love, and that's a nice, like really nice thought. Yeah, thanks.
Do we not all have as we hear Sophie's system and this how this embracing and honoring of parts and seeing the parts? Don't we have parts? I have parts that are a little envious here. That's like, gosh, I like what's going on in Sophie, what she's doing, how she's seeing the parts and honoring. I want to be honored like that too. I think I want to go visit in Sophie Square and be met and welcomed in her system. Any other final thoughts today?
I'm just noticing the part of me that's, how is Sid doing?
Oh,
Sid doing?
oh, I'm bored. I'm how's it doing? It's so rich for me, because partly of it in this role of the facilitator, like what I'm inviting us all to do, that's really what I'm doing here. That's the only thing I'm doing, is just being, is truly like celebrating and seeing, connecting with, hearing, welcoming all the parts on the stage and seeing the innocence and beauty of your parts. And this is always the highlight of my day, doing these groups, because I get to do that. I get to be that way with you guys. I get to celebrate you. And it's so wonderful. I have a friend of mine, and she came to one of these groups the other day for the first time, and she knows me in my world with I'm visiting my parents in Memphis right now and helping them, and she knows me and she supports me in my romantic relationship. And she's like, Sid, I don't get it. Look at you in the group. Look how you just love all the parts and everything. And she's like, but then in your romantic relationship, you're like, oh my God. And she's like, why don't you do it? So this is my practice, what we're doing here. It's such a gift it's my practice. And so I'm doing great. I have such gratitude and enjoyment of where we went today, organically, right? Organically. Like it was Jessica's wish, like, what if I could show up this way with some tears? And then somebody did that for us. Sophie did that for us and like took us into this place, into all of us, and Susan bringing up death, and Angie, this love of family, and Jessica, this joy of life, and Vinder, the anger, and it's all of us. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sid.
Thanks, everyone.